Has it really been 150 episodes? Indeed it has. What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have ourselves a jam-packed show, as this is probably going to be one of the bigger shows out there. We have ourselves a big-time guest. If you haven't been following on Twitter, if you haven't been following iSports Radio via social media, you are missing out on who this guest is. He is an absolute legend. You are not going to want to miss it. Also, we have some NVA to discuss as the regular season is over. Which teams have made it to the playoffs and which teams are unfortunately staying home. Also, we have a little VNL to discuss as the men just wrapped up its week and will be playing in the knockout round. So you know what time it is. Hand me a volleyball. Set up the net, as I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you the 150th episode of Set Point here on iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Hope you all are having a great Monday afternoon, great Monday evening, great Monday wherever you are listening from. Without any further delay, let's get this volleyball action started. But first and foremost, we have to welcome our guest. My guest is the broadcast and marketing director of the National Volleyball Association, or the NVA. He is a former Las Vegas Ramblers volleyball player, and he also played this year. And also, he's just an all-around down-to-earth guy. You could hear him on the broadcast of every NVA match with Ira Thor and the rest of the NVA crew. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the one, the only, Mr. Nick England. How you doing, Nick?
Wow, that is quite the intro. Doing fantastic, man. Great to be here. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Nick. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your day and coming on here. And it's an honor to have you here. It really is. And we're going to have some fun today. So before we get on into the volleyball action, just want to get this out of the way. These are the thoughts and opinions of myself and Nick England, and not the thoughts of the NVA or iSports Radio or any third or fourth party organizations. The disclaimer is also in the description as well of this show. So now that's out of the way, Nick, the floor is yours. Feel free to tell everybody who you are and basically who Nick England is and how you got into volleyball.
Yeah, man. So it's been a long time coming. Unfortunately for everyone, I think that you just gave me the most grand introduction I've ever had in my life. I'm a lot less exciting than that. Started playing volleyball at 14. Both of my parents actually played. Neither of them in high school or college. They kind of picked it up as adults and played high school volleyball, played club volleyball growing up in San Diego. Found out at age 18 when I signed with UCSD to go play some NCAA D2 ball that had actually fractured my spine. And there was concerns of my inability to walk again if I continued playing. So I pursued education at UC Irvine instead. Decided to play some club volleyball there. Had some interesting times actually playing with the women's NCAA team as a practice player. And thought I was done playing as a national champion runner-up and then at College Club All-American. I thought I would finish right then at the end of college. And then found myself missing the sport too much and spent the next year playing professionally in Northern California with the Old Pro League, the PVL, and then went on to help form the NVA and have been with the NVA since its inception and creation in 2016. I everything you can imagine, from playing to managing to now being the vice president of the Las Vegas Ramblers, in addition to helping run the league. So there's a lot to unpack there. That's the high level, everything about me. But, you know, at the higher level, only played college club and transitioned into the NVA after.
Awesome introduction right there, Nick. Great stuff right there. And I did not know of. So the more you know, and it's always good to know about the backstory of some of these big-time people. So, talking about the NVA, how did the NVA originate, and who basically founded the NVA, and what was the idea of the NVA?
So I mentioned I played in the PVL. It was a Premier Volleyball League. It was associated with USA Volleyball, and it ran for, I think, 3 or 4 years. Final season was back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. So I played on NorCal Wildfire at that time. So I was flying up from Southern California to Northern California several times a week. Actually played alongside Southern Exposure outside hitter Lev Gershfeld at the time. And we were both on the NorCal Wildfire. And so we were competing there. And that's where the now owner, Bill Lee of the NBA, he had the Blizzard, who was the Southern California team in the PVL. And he saw what was going on there, and he thought that he could do a little bit more and do it a little bit better. So after that season concluded and the PVL folded, we went in 2016 with the 2 teams that ended up winning the highest division in Open and AA with Blizzard. And the goal was basically kind of recruit and show that, we had talent so good here in the U.S. that we could really formulate a professional league. And some of the guys on my AA included Olympians, national team member Josh Tuaniga, Olympian Kyle Insing, JT Hatch, some of the best players in the world, and we were all on a AA team. And I was the 15th guy kind of helping manage that roster, and just along for the ride, to be honest. And, the other Open team had some pretty notable names, but from there we used that as the launching point to bring other top teams in USA Volleyball along. And we launched in December of 2017 the inaugural Las Vegas Showcase event that showcased top talents like David Lee, Paul Lottman, Russ Holmes, other Olympians like that. So you had the McKibbins brothers, Taylor Crabb was playing in that event. So some of the biggest names in USA Volleyball. And that was kind of to showcase what the NBA could do. And from there, we began the inaugural full season in 2018. So here in 2022, we're in the middle of our 5th season going strong.
Excellent. And honestly, the NBA has done an outstanding job. It's really grown, and it's had a great playoff system. It has a great playoff system. It has 6 teams in each conference, and then obviously there's divisions as well. So it's not like you have to win the conference to be the top seed and whatnot. It's growing exponentially, and I've basically explained this on past episodes that the NVA is just going to continue to get bigger and bigger as time goes by. And who knows, maybe the NVA will be just as big as some of the mainstream sports.
I mean, that's the goal, right? So when you see all these athletes going overseas for 8 months, they're going to places that they enjoy traveling the world frequently, but sometimes they're kind of you're stuck isolated from a lot of family and friends. And you've heard even notable faces like Micah Christensen talk about their willingness to take pretty substantial pay cuts to come home, to play in front of the U.S., to be home with their families. And there's a lot of reason for guys to be here, but kind of the big thing separating from where we are now to where we can be, that's unfortunately just the money. So to get that money, you got to go through the growing things, and that's a lot of putting your head to the grindstone and getting after it, and that's what the NBA is all about.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, there is such thing called Athletes Unlimited, and that basically is a pro women's volleyball league. Is there anything in the works of a WNVA, or is it just going to be separate, or is Athletes Unlimited just going to be separate from the women's side?
Yeah, so as far as I know, Athletes Unlimited, they're doing their own, I think it's about a 6-week season where they get in there with all the women. I love watching how they kind of market and bring in players. their format's still a little confusing to me, admittedly, how you follow individual players. I'm a big team guy. I really like following the stories of the teams and the players that make up of it, not so much just the individuals. So that's something that I might do a little differently myself, but, they're seeing some success after 2 seasons. As far as the NVA goes, at its inception, the goal is, get the men off the ground, but very, very transparently, women's side is absolutely part of the roadmap. No set date. I don't have more details, but that conversation has been quite frankly had, and that's part of it. You can't just have the pro men's side, especially with, I think that's what makes women's volleyball so unique, or in general, is women's volleyball is far, far, far more popular than men's, so it's almost kind of funny in the sense that I think the women's pro league is a more obvious starting point than the men's, where for many sports that may not be the case, but based on where the league was started, we started with the men's, and we're going to grow to the women's. At least that's the plan.
Awesome. I think it's definitely doable, and with how the NVA is growing, I think anything is possible. So, now, are there any other ideas of expansion teams, or how does the NVA plan to grow, all over the United States? Because I know there's Utah, but is there any possibility that there could be a NorCal team or any other teams from the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. So there isn't a plan to expand the number of teams in the upcoming season. Obviously, the goal is always that when we add a new franchise team, that they're there to stay. But part of that is you're doing your best to vet the team, making sure that they can sustain themselves financially. It's making sure that they have a market of players that they're able to, go after. And a lot of that is, it all might make sense on paper, but when the rubber meets the road, it doesn't always work out. And so the NBA is very committed to supporting all of these teams, these expansion teams. In 2021, we obviously added the Dallas Tornadoes and the Chicago Untouchables. In 2022, we added the Colorado Kraken and Seattle Sasquatch. And so the goal, I think, is that we got to a great place with the 12 teams we have, see what we can do to make sure that we bring them all back in the off-season. That's certainly the goal. And maybe just spend 1 year evening everything out. But I know that there is a plan to continue growing in the future. But there's a vetting process that goes with that. Obviously, we're looking at markets, just to name a few, that, I love seeing more East Coast guys, Midwest. And we've got some great representation in California, and there's so much talent here. It's hard not to want to just stack more teams. But part of creating that national league is definitely the country as a whole. And so that's what we love seeing. 2 teams down in Texas. There's a booming market down there. Getting Florida involved, New Jersey, Chicago, Utah, Sasquatch, Colorado, Las Vegas. So pretty well spread out, but definitely some holes to fill in there as well.
Indeed. And one of the things that does stand out to me when it comes to the NBA is that there are 3 teams from Southern California: the Inland Empire Matadors, the Orange County Stars, and the Los Angeles Blaze. So bouncing away from the NVA, do you think Southern California, or California as a whole, is a hotbed for volleyball in general? Not just for the NCAA men's and women's volleyball scene, but the high school boys and girls volleyball scene?
Oh, absolutely. I think you're dead on with that. And I mean, I would say that has to do with the culture in general. When you go to the beach cities in LA or Orange County and San Diego, that's the scene I grew up in. It's just a part of the day-to-day life, and it's always such a weird culture shock to me when I hear that. I forget, and I'm privileged to say this, but I forget that there's parts of the country that boys high school volleyball doesn't exist. It's not sanctioned, and that's one of the uphill battles that we fought everywhere. So, taking a step, looking at it before even the NCAA scene, like you say. Now, the other thing that I think kind of happens is everyone's fighting to get out to these D1 programs on the West Coast, from Long Beach, Pepperdine, LA, UCI, UCSD, Concordia. There's just so many options. SC, that I think the other thing is many guys, when they finish school, if they can land a job based on their network, I think they also just kind of end up in California. So there's a lot of guys that might be from the Midwest or the East Coast that don't end up back at home. So that disproportionately also overrepresents California when you're looking into creating a pro league here.
How do you become a player in the NVA, and what are basically some of the requirements of playing in the NVA?
Oh, man, that is a fantastic question with a very difficult answer. So to become a player, every team handles it differently. Some teams have been doing open tryouts, and I'm pushing the little league to move away from that. A little bit more of, I like the owners when they're doing their recruiting. We have fantastic NCAA programs, whether it be D1, D2, D3. Even like NAIA has some of the best players. Felix Chapman is an NAIA player and is by far the most effective player in the NBA right now. He's played with USA on a variety of teams, and so there's a lot of hidden talent there. And again, myself, I'm a college club player out of UC Irvine. I didn't play in NCAA. I think the biggest thing is that understand you're trying to pursue a league that we call ourselves a pro league, and I understand that people want to challenge that in the sense of, no, these athletes aren't paid full time. And a lot of Americans are used to pro sports being these $100 billion industries that everyone on a squad, their full livelihood is paid for. The reality is in the volleyball world, all over the world, many professional leagues, there are athletes that work regular day jobs and still train 4 or 5 days a week. But there's no one in the volleyball community struggling to call them a pro athlete. Of course, when you go to Italy, these top leagues, yeah, so that's, but not always the case. So to answer the second part of that question, be determined. Put together a player resume. Show what you've done. Put together, some highlight reels. Show what you can do. Give a good match. Don't just show me your favorite bounces, but show me that you can play a sustained match of good volleyball. Contact the teams. You've got to market yourself and sell yourself because, for the Ramblers, I'm recruiting every day. I'm looking at the top players overseas. I'm looking at the top players that are graduating from D1, 2, and 3 programs, and I'm seeing who's going to be the right fit. Because more than anything, I'm looking for a mindset. There's a lot of great players, but if you can't mesh in and fill in with that roster of guys, then frankly, I'm not really interested in you. And that's just kind of our culture. But I know that every single culture on every one of these teams is different. You'll see, looking at Colorado Kraken, you look at their setter, Rowdy Martin, outside opposite Raul Patel. These guys don't have even a college background, and they're just some outdoor players that had an opportunity given on where those teams were popping up, and they're looking to get involved. So you'll see Olympians to basically guys with just an outdoor background getting involved, but it's taking advantage of it, be willing to work hard, and writing your own story.
Just goes to show that. Oh, did you have something else you want to say?
No, I think that kind of wraps it up. Obviously, I'll answer more. I'm a little long-winded at times, but sometimes it's just hard to get any specific answers. So that kind of wraps up the general gist of it. But there's plenty of things to dive into there, of course.
It's all good. But yeah, it just goes to show that you could do whatever you want so long as you pursue your dreams. I know it sounds cheesy, but it is the truth. Now, as for you being the marketing and broadcast director of the NVA, what are your roles and duties as said director?
Yeah, so I really took over the marketing side in January. I've been working with the league, obviously, since inception in 2016 in a variety of roles. But that's where the team, we were kind of having a conversation about expectations, and that's where I was kind of promoted to that position. So on the day-to-day, it's figuring out what the fans want to see, how we want to present ourselves. So it's making sure that something as simple as like our TikTok or our Instagram and the way our website looks, that it all makes sense and that it works. We've got an app, and so it's kind of keeping tabs and all that. But at the same time, it's what makes sense. What do I want to market? It's things like the All-Star event's been kind of my baby this season. That's something I've been working on for the last 7 or 8 months, and we finally got to do that this season, and it was amazing to see it come together. But at the same time, it's things like doing post-game press conferences, doing the pre-game show, and it's just a variety of different ways for fans to be involved with the league and get to know our athletes. And so it's kind of interesting how the broadcast side and the marketing side interact, and it kind of just becomes this complete package. So it's finding out ways to just really make our league complete from the viewer standpoint at home.
And then something else I also noticed is that stats are becoming a thing, like official stats in terms of games, like stat sheets that you would get at like an NCAA volleyball match where it basically comes out every timeout or every end of the set, and that's something that needs to be like exemplified as well. And I think it's definitely, again, it just goes to show the growth of the NVA, because once the NVA started making those tiny tweaks of like adding these sort of things like pregame shows and TikTok and whatnot, it's eventually going to start booming, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. And you're hitting the nail on the head there. And, big shout out here. I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to say just thank you to Kenzie Shand. She's our statistician that she flies out for every single event. She's all over data volley. Previously, shout out to my brother. He was helping out with her as well. But, Kenzie's the sole owner and responsibility of those statistics being taken during every single match. So she has worked 61 matches this year, including the All-Star match. She started out one for us. So every single set, coaches, the announcing team, we're all getting live feedback, and that only continues to improve our product. And so, we're working on the back end, kind of pushing that into the website and making sure it's reliable. And then I'm taking, to call back to your other question, what does that mean from the marketing side? It's, I'm working to get a stats pushed out reliably so the fans can now digest and see who's playing so well. But, we're finding some kinks in our own system, things that don't work well and things that do. And so I'm kind of refining that process. So I would love to say that the Instagram posts come out regularly with the top stat leaders, and it's kind of it's not always so simple. And unfortunately for the fans, I know we would love to see that always, but it takes a little bit of time, and that's a big part of my role is refining what it means to have regular stats coming out, always available on our website, and that stuff is all correct, but making sure it's digestible as well for quicker Instagram posts and things like that. So that's kind of part of the long-term process that I work through as the director of marketing as well.
Excellent. So you said you were the vice president of the Las Vegas Ramblers. I have a good friend of mine named Vinny Rodriguez that you definitely know. What's it like working with Vinny, and talk about the relationship with Vinny? And no, Vinny is not related to me.
Oh, yeah, no, it's funny. 5 minutes before this, you and I kind of touched base. I was on a 30-minute phone call with Vinny. And just a quick note, I had mentioned to you, at any time I'm kind of about 5 minutes from home. I have a dead zone here. So if you lose me, I will be through a clip and right back on, but I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Mm-hmm.
But no, Vinny and I go back a long time, man. We met each other in 2017, playing for Blizzard. And at that time, Vinny and I, so he was running the top team on Blizzard, and I was sort of helping with the second team. And we sometimes had differences of opinions, but through that, we learned how much we both just loved the sport and learned to appreciate the hard work we were both doing. And over the next couple of years, Vinny and I grew to be he's one of my best friends. And at the time, I was a manager actually for the OC Stunners. And the team was heading a different direction than I was at the time, and so I decided to step away. And I was going to try out for the brand new Blaze at the time because they were still a local squad. And I mentioned that to Vinny, that I was leaving, and unbeknownst to me, he was creating the Las Vegas Ramblers. And so at that time, he actually requested that I become the first Rambler, whether I played and kind of helped out in the background, but he wanted me to help manage the team. So that's actually where I got involved in 2020, went out to Las Vegas with Vinny, and we ran the team from there and got it started and off the ground. And now I help with the day-to-day stuff. I recruit for the team, and we talk hours on end every day. He's also the director of public relations, so and communications. So he's working with me as a director on the NVA team as well. So, I mean, we work together every single day. He's an absolute monster, and he does so much for the league.
Absolutely. And I also should make note that Vinny also was an assistant for Orange Coast College, and he also played overseas, if I remember correctly. So Vinny Rodriguez is a great overall guy and down-to-earth guy, and I'm excited that he's doing big things. So
Yeah, but I might be losing you here, just an FYI.
Okay. Yeah, just so the listeners out there know, we are live with Nick England, the marketing and broadcast director of the NVA. So Nick is actually going to be entering a dead zone, so I might be losing him, so bear with me. So continuing on, so when it
right now, but if I drop out, you'll know why.
Right. Just giving the listeners a heads up. But for the NVA,
Absolutely.
is there an NVA draft or a free agency like there is with all the other pro leagues like the NFL and the NBA and the MLB?
No, there's not. Not right now. It's kind of a catch-as-catch-can. The thing is when you have a draft, what the second piece to that, because it makes a ton of sense to have a draft. But the piece that's missing there, though, is if you draft a player that wants to live in Southern California and you're Florida, well, you can't make the player move. And when you look at the NFL, they're getting a contract, there's a minimum, and there's an expectation that players then move, and that's part of their career. But for right now, since the NBA cannot afford to pay players and have that kind of a recommendation, well, we can't pay all players, and that's something we'll probably dive into. But you can't draft a player and then force them to play there. And I think that Athletes Unlimited, if I'm not mistaken, they kind of had that issue where players were getting drafted, but players were then taking contracts overseas and not available. So it kind of it felt a little, maybe a couple too early.
Got it. See, that is kind of tricky. Like, you can't have someone play in a place that they're unable to play in. And honestly, I hope doesn't come down to that it doesn't have to be a travel issue, and I'm hoping that it doesn't. There's no wrinkles in it. But I was unaware that there was no NVA draft or free agency. So anyway,
yeah. So to be fair, well, I guess to touch on that though, there is kind of free agency in the sense that the owners talk about who may or may not be on teams. Players are always eligible to be traded. There's not really anything binding players. There are roster locks so that players have transferred teams mid-season, and all the owners work together. So usually it's kept pretty friendly. But this is pro sports, man. Not everyone's always excited about the way that's going to unfold. So, sometimes players are looking to make moves or teams need a piece that someone else has, and they're going to do what they can. So that's kind of part of the interesting thing in the league is seeing that growth occur.
Got it. So as for you played for the Las Vegas Ramblers, and you even come back. You even came back for one match this year, which you actually had yourself a big game. Talk to us. What was it like being an NVA player, and what was it like playing in the NVA and playing for the Ramblers?
Sure. So I played in the NBA originally for Blizzard in 2018 and 2019, and then 2018, and then in 2019 we became the OC Stunners, so I played for them as well during that time. And then in 2020, several teams left the NBA to create the VLA. And so that's when we had our renaissance and really kind of grew the league and changed directions. And a lot of our growth really happened. So that's when we grew to 8 teams and had our COVID 2020 showcase. And that's when I began playing with the Ramblers. So I played that one event, and that's actually kind of when the broadcasting took off, and I was asked to step away from playing and take a more permanent role. So during the 2021 season, I actually didn't play while I was still technically rostered for the Ramblers. I was intending to be retired. Now coming into the 2022 season, I've played 4 matches this year actually, 2 during Event 1 and 2 during Event 4, based on some personnel not being available due to other responsibilities. Mm-hmm. But it is worth noting, I do train still 2 to 3 days a week with my guys. I still play against the Blaze, Matadors, and Ramblers, and the Stunners, quite regularly. So while I'm not always in the best shape, I'm still very much in playing shape. And I love getting out there to play, man. And I recruited a lot of the Ramblers guys to be people that I would want to play with. Michael Keegan is a guy I coached in high school. Brandon and Rattray went to one of our rival high schools. They've been longtime friends. So there's just a lot of people that I've worked with. It's just an absolute stud on the court and a sweetheart off of it. So playing alongside guys like that, Ryan Mather was one of the guys that we got by happenstance back in 2020, but he's just been an integral part of the roster for obvious reasons. But he's just a diehard rambler, and he said, I'm gonna ramble till I die, man. And so having guys like that on the court with me and getting to play those matches, it's a privilege. I love being able to help run the team, but there's a lot of pride for me when I go play alongside them as well.
All right. That is amazing to hear. Great stuff, as always. Let's actually jump into this past weekend. So, this past weekend was the final week of the 2022 NVA regular season. First of all, let's start with the Friday matches. All those Friday matches, it at least went 4 sets, with the exception of one match going 5 sets. What can you say about those matches, and what is it like being a broadcaster with Ira Thor?
Oh, it's fantastic. I love working alongside Ira Thor, Matt Prosser. Matt's been, broadcasting all this VNL stuff. He was out in Canada working on it. He was doing some of the World Cup beach stuff. And then, Ira Thor has broadcast every for the Sun. He works taking it until I make it, to be honest. In terms, it's just, that's something that I think that gets kind of talked about a little bit less, and maybe it's because of the expectation of fans, but something that I love that we do so well is the rosters are so consistent event to event, and so it's so easy to be a fan because you're always going to have to see who shows up, because again, that's the unfortunate reality of where the league's at. Some of these guys are going to have personal and family responsibilities that, since the league just can't pay everyone yet, there are other parts of life still. But for the most part, guys that are just so committed. And so it's easy to be because you know who you're going to see between events and time after time. So it's just so great to see that. And I think that's what made Friday so fun, is looking at it. There were so many matchups that we had seen during event number 1 that we were getting, they were going to run it back. And so it was great to see that all unfold. Like you said, everything going 4 sets, one going with the 5 sets. It was just, it really showcased how great those teams and those matchups were.
Before we continue on with this weekend's matches, so the final week of the regular season is basically the same format as the NFL, where the final week of the NFL, everyone plays everyone in their division. Was that basically an idea thought of by one of you all in the NVA, or was that just automatically just implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be lying if I said we aren't looking at how other leagues run and stuff. From the NFL and the NBA, and when we're designing our conferences, when we're looking at about how the league should run. And so in the NFL, not every team plays every team, and there's a lot of value in having some of those conference and divisional matchups, because they really mean something in terms of how you qualify for the end of the season. And so we had the round robin last year. You played 9 matches one match against every other team. But this year, since we added 2 more, by kind of adding in those divisional weekends at the first and last, it really gives you a chance to have a little bit more control of your destiny. And I think that we saw that in the sense that there were still 4 teams on Sunday from their own bids into the championship weekend. They weren't waiting to see if someone else won or someone else lost to score the right points. And I think that really spoke to how successful we were with us.
Uh-oh. So it looks like Nick has entered his dead zone, as we're going to look to try to reconnect with him. But overall, to summarize what he pretty much just said, basically the entire weekend was the whole weekend was basically the divisional matchups. Like, the entire American Central Conference played one another. They played 2 matches against one another. A team played B team and against C team, which played A team. So overall,
I'm back. Are you able to hear me?
Oh yeah. Okay, welcome back, Nick. So carry on.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I guess just I don't know where you lost. Yeah, we definitely derive a lot of the sports, NFL, NBA, of course, to play their divisional matchups, and it really put them more in control of their season. Just make sure. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear
perfect. You. And so, we saw the success of that format based on in event number 5 there. We saw both Exposure and Matadors as well as Kraken and Tornadoes, all 4 teams trying to find their playoff bid. They had complete control. All they had to do was win. And seasons past, sometimes it comes down to and does someone else lose? Does that? And of course, that can still happen with tiebreakers. But I really think it spoke to the strength and the fact if you won, you got to go play weekend. And it really just was it was because of how the formatting was structured. These teams had more control over their own playoff destiny. And I think that really spoke to how successful it was.
Mm-hmm. And that was basically something I was basically allotting to on the Setpoint Twitter account, that Southern Exposure and Inland Empire Matadors was basically win and you're in, and same with Dallas Tornadoes and Colorado Kraken. And that's the beauty of the final week of any league. Basically, there are going to be scenarios where there is a win and in situation, and that basically builds up the drama and tension in certain matches, and it raises the stakes. And that's why I think some of these leagues are basically succeeding, as well as this one, of course. But as for those 2 matches, I definitely was impressed by Southern Exposure and how they were able to just sweep their way to victory. Now, the Tornadoes had to basically grind it out. They basically were led by the strong arm of Felix Chapman. What can you say? You obviously talked about how Chapman was a former NAIA player. So talk about Chapman's outstanding performance, and also talk about how he could be the face of the NVA.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I got to say, Felix Chapman is just an all-around great guy, which makes him even easier to root for. But yeah, he spent his time as an NAIA champion at Grandview University out in Illinois. And, I believe they're in Illinois. Hopefully I've gotten this one wrong before, but he was at Grandview University. And just seeing his transition, I mean, he's USA on several different occasions for Pan Am rosters. I believe rosters as a right side, middle, and outside on differing years. So it just speaks to how fluidly he moves around the game. And, just seeing him out there spearheading that team, it's certainly no question putting up multiple 30-kill games, setting a league record with 36 kills during event number 4. Just puts out impressive performance after impressive performance.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, Felix Chapman, every time I see him, it's basically get the ball to him, and then he just pounds down the ball for the kill. It's honestly amazing. And I'm just going to say this. The Dallas Tornadoes could be a tough matchup for the New Jersey Freedom. Now, the Freedom is obviously the number 1 seed from the National Conference, but I think that Freedom versus Tornadoes matchup could be a sneaky good matchup, and I'm really looking forward to that. How about you?
Yeah, I think that really can. The one I'm looking at is right now, if I had to give you a team that is the best serving and passing team in the league, it is New Jersey Freedom. And I think that's going to be one of those things we have to look at how the Tornadoes are able to weather the storm. I think one of the people that's not talked about enough on that Tornadoes team is Sam Schuldenberg, their libero. He's an absolute phenom. And for him in that All-Star match making an appearance as well. And
looks like Nick has kind of entered his dead zone, and he was a lot. Oh.
Oh, sorry. Did I cut out?
Yeah, you're back, though.
Okay, I'm back. I'm finally at home, settled in, and won't be going through any more dead spots. I'm hoping. This is the advantage. This is the advantage of living out in the middle of nowhere, so apologies to everyone for that.
It's all good.
But one of the things that I look at is just well-rounded lineups. And when you see performances from top kill leaders like Joe Norman and Ian Cap time after time, it's just, I wonder if the Tornadoes have enough tools to weather that storm.
Great insight right there from the Tornadoes. And yeah, I feel every time I see the Freedom, they just seem to be, they get better and better, and they always seem to cover their bases in terms of their strengths and their weaknesses. And despite getting pushed to 5 sets against the Stunners, they were able to succeed in the 5th set, winning that ultimately. And Joe Norman is obviously a top player and a talent unmatched, as basically you call him Joe Normus. What can you say about Joe Norman and how he continues to just wow everybody?
Man, Joe made his NVA debut actually on Southern Exposure in 2020 at Utah on one of the best teams on paper that just did not have a great showing. In fact, they won only 1 set at that 4-day event. But since then, he's rejoined Team Freedom, they were Team Freedom last year and now officially rebranded to the New Jersey Freedom. Joe was kind of coming a bit. I think he was kind of finding his way on that team last year, and at times we were seeing stellar performances. And he was just finding how he was going to fit with that squad. And it's been amazing to see his progress in the league because he's played in several top leagues. He's played in Korea. I believe he played in Cyprus. He's played in several just, awesome leagues. But watching him continue to just blossom and just grow on the court, he is just another human compared to himself last year. He had great matches, but he will take over matches this season. And he's been such an integral part of the roster, and much like Felix Chapman when I mentioned, Joe's just the nicest guy. He will give anyone the time of day, and having him part of the league is just an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely, and Felix Chapman is just amazing, as well as Joe Norman and all those NVA players. I feel it's super tough to train as an NVA player. I did not play the sport of volleyball, even though the high school I went to does have a good volleyball culture, but I can only imagine what being a volleyball player would be tough like, especially how difficult it would be. So, anyway, as for you, Nick, going back to the... Uh-oh, Nick, are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I was getting another call. So sorry about that. So
no problem.
So anyway, retrailing my train of thought, do you think the Stunners and the Freedom was the match of the weekend, or what other matches basically stood out to you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, that had to be it. I mean, not only did they, sometimes when you see a 5-setter, it sounds exciting after the fact, but then you go kind of dive into it, and there's so many times that it's, 3 games that may not be very good ones, and it's a 25-15 blowout and kind of just changing back and forth. But that match between those two teams, they were pushing each other 25-22, 25-23, set after set after set. And there was just so many big swings. And you see the likes of Shane Beamer and Nick West as well as Matt Hilling on the Stunners just absolutely killing it. But I think that's what really, as just a fan of the league, I've waited for so long to see Freedom kind of showcase their X factor, and watching them push the Stunners with their serving pressure and their passing, presence. It really showcased just how dangerous this Freedom team is, and I would say that they really won that game in the serve and pass. But it was impressive to me how close the Stunners kept it, given how, I think kind of how much they were struggling in that serve-receive part of the game, which was even a little bit uncharacteristic. So I think Stunners might be in a good spot in the sense that there's still continued grit and growth in that opportunity and that loss for that squad. If anyone's counting them out because of that loss, I would tell them to kindly recalculate how they're evaluating the Stunners, because postseason is where that team really blossoms.
Absolutely. I was just about ready to say that the postseason last year was what really was the big coming out party for the Stunners. And we all need to remember that last year the Stunners went 0-3 to start the season, and then they eventually won the championship, because for those that don't know, the Stunners are the reigning champions. And for me, I think if there's one team that's the most dangerous team that no one wants to face in the playoffs, it's the Stunners. And even though they're the 3 seed from the National Conference, they're going to be the toughest out for any team that wants to face them.
I definitely agree. And I mean, they brought back the entire squad from last season, shy of Josh Eisenberg in the libero spot, replaced by Dylan Shigikawa. And then Shane Beamer going from that middle 3 position last year, replacing Nick Amato. So he stepped in and had a brilliant year so far. So, not major downgrades or anything like that to be seen. And Jair Santiago playing very well as well. So the team is almost exactly where they were last year. But it's great to see them continue battling. And anyone that's, they're they just basically do what they need to do to get to the postseason. And then from there, that's where they really flip the switch.
Mm-hmm. And now that you mentioned Nick Amato, he was a former guest on Set Point, and I actually knew Amato through his days at Orange Coast College and at Long Beach State. So tell me, what can you say about Nick Amato and how talented he was at the middle blocker position when he played for the Stars?
Oh, man. I miss having Nick in the league. He's a great guy, and, I know he's pursuing coaching, and a shout-out to him. He just got a job as the head coach at, I believe, Golden West College.
Correct.
And so he's spearheading that program now. So congrats to him after being an assistant at Long Beach. And, he just had a good showing at Wapaka this past weekend, playing an AVP event out there. Played against my boy Jordan Hoppy on the Ramblers, so shout-out to those two. But, I think that Nick Amato is the poster child for what Long Beach does and why they're so successful. It's kind of it's a physical manifestation of Alan Knipe and how he coaches whole players, not just positions. Obviously, as a middle, Nick Amato, some guys get the rap as a middle. They can't play back row. They don't have good hands. Anybody that's ever played with Nick Amato, he's one of the most well-rounded players on the court. He can play outside hitter if he wanted to, because he passes well, has great back row presence, and he's just an all-around great player. So missing and losing players like him in the NVA, it's always well felt on the court, but also just miss having personalities like him in general.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, Nick's story, if for those that don't know, is honestly an amazing one. I remember he blew out his ACL in a practice at Long Beach State, and he had a red shirt. So I feel that Nick's story is absolutely amazing. And for those that need for those that want to know the full story of Nick, definitely do ask him, and he'll basically give it to you. So anyway, back to the NVA at hand. So the up and coming playoffs. What is that vibe going to be like at Pierce Sports Center? And basically, how much of a crowd do you get when it comes to the NBA playoffs, especially last year?
We draw a crowd. Unfortunately, given the location of the gym, it's a little bit harder to pull some fans out there. It's a little bit difficult to get to. And since we run the 3-day event, that's going to mean that all 4 quarterfinals are on Friday. So you'll see some family and friends in the area swing by, but a lot of people still at work. We do draw some bigger crowds for the Saturday and Sunday semifinals and finals and third place matches. But that's something the league is continuing to work on. Obviously, in our first 2 or 3 seasons, we partnered with a lot of youth events and traveled all over the country, and it was great. We loved being a part of the youth movement. Unfortunately, you can't grow your broadcast and, kind of grow the way the league looks when you're doing those kinds of events. In order for us to run our challenge system and to run our multi-camera broadcast, we really needed to find a gym that we could reliably schedule and make sure that we were in there on the dates that we needed to run our league. And Pierce has been so fantastic hosting us for the last 2 seasons. So, it's been a little bit harder to get some butts and seats at times, but at the very least, we know that everyone at home is able to enjoy the product And that's going to be one of the things that we continue to work on as a league. That is already on the slate as something that's, going to be addressed in the upcoming season. With this year, the really big focus was how do we dial in the broadcast so even if you're not in Southern California, you get to enjoy this product. Because it's more important that it's accessible to thousands than just the couple hundred that might roll through the gym on a given weekend.
Yes, and I know the feeling. I've definitely tried to make it a goal to attend an NVA match or two. And as you said, Pierce Sports Center is pretty much out and about, especially where I live. But I will say I do plan to make it to those NVA events or the NVA playoff events. Like, I really want to attend as a member of the media, even if I'm like if I'm like on the balcony or like in the crowd having to like film and do all that other stuff. Like, I will still attend this just because I want to do my part to grow the game of the NVA.
Well, I always this is one of the other interesting facets. As just kind of a quick small nod, one of the things that I found that I didn't expect to find in the NBA is, the U.S. not really having FIVB certified refs, not having as many content creators like yourself, not having people that have coached at this level. There's so many missing facets when you try to create a pro league that you have to help train. So, we're lucky to have the likes of Mike Mon and Pat Bradley, two of our major refs. And, Mike Mon helps run the entire reffing staff. And they have been so phenomenal for us for just the last couple of years. And so they continuously train these refs and they work and they do match reviews to make sure that they're learning and growing. And, all the owners talk about, how are they recruiting? How are they growing their business? Because that's what these teams are. And so there's just a lot of these kind of growth things. And that's why I was so honored when you asked me to come on and talk about it. I love seeing people like yourself that are just so invested in the league and the sport as a whole because, people like you are what help bring our sport to the masses. And just hearing your message and stuff like that, it's awesome. So anytime you ever want to get in there to the events, you need access to any resources we have, always just let me know. And sure, we're happy and easily can make sure to support you on that.
I appreciate that, Nick. All right, so we have about 10 or so minutes left. So bouncing back over to you, you recently tied the knot with your wife, Allie. So when did you first meet Allie, and what was it like first meeting her?
Yeah, so my wife, and it's Ariana, or Ari. We met each other almost a decade ago now. We've been together 9 years. We got together back in college at UC Irvine. And, she's been pressuring me for the last 7 to finally get married. But, we've been going through an awesome journey together. And back in October of 2021, we finally tied the knot. And in the time since then, we got our little dog, Oliver, who you might see all over the NVA Instagram and stuff like that. Official canine of the NVA, as he was dubbed by Ira Thor. But you might also hear him in the background right now. We've also since bought, he's chatting right now. He's a husky mix, so he's always making sure his voice is heard. We also just bought a house, and so we've got tons of life changes going on. But it's been phenomenal. She's so supportive of me working with the league, and she's a teacher, so she's working with youth all the time too. So she understands what it is to kind of tirelessly be pursuing things for the betterment of others, even when it's not always the easiest thing to do.
You actually took the next question right out of my mouth. You also are a dog dad, as basically Ollie or Oliver is basically your son. Your son. Yep.
That's we're keeping it like that for now. In the last 8 months, we also already just finished up her master's degree, so she's now officially, I guess technically it's still Master Baldini, soon to be Master England. There's some paperwork associated with that, and we're great at a lot of things. Paperwork, not so much one of them, but, getting just all that going on has been absolutely hectic, but Ollie's been a great addition and warms up the house nicely, and he makes his appearance at plenty of events. So on championship weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if he makes an appearance at the gym, sporting some of his favorite Rambler and NVA handkerchiefs.
Mm-hmm. I basically saw on the Instagram story that Saturdays are for the boys. I should also make note that when it comes to dogs, Saturdays are for the good boys. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. It is, could not be more true. And I'm always getting little pings on my phone while I'm on air about that he's at home watching Dad broadcast or he's in the stands. So it's great because, we joke about the personification of animals, but where I really feel it is just that my wife is so supportive of what I'm doing, and she might do it through the guise of in comedy of having a great dog, but it just speaks to just how supportive she's been. My mom has been at almost every event, and so the family is still just 100% behind what I'm doing, what the league is doing, and I need that because, after working 40, 50 hours in my regular daytime job, I'm working 20 to 30 hours a week with the league, so there's a lot of hours being put in there, so I wouldn't be able to do it without her for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like Ollie is basically saying hello to the people, so we say hello to Ollie at IE Sports Radio. So anyway, for the NBA social media game, what is that like, and how important is it for a social media game to be on its A game?
Oh, it's tireless. It is a constant battle because, you never do enough. Every little bit that the league grows, you're trying to grow more, and you're competing against yourself. And I have to give a massive shout out to the social media team. Ryan Schickling and the Las Vegas Ramblers helps out. Brian Denise is the man behind the camera doing so much work, but also Langdon Liebler. He's a Virginia Tech College Club guy. He's heading into his senior year. He just comes out and he drove cross country to pursue some work stuff over the summer, but also volunteer his time at every event. And he is just one of the main guys getting all those clips that you see going up. He's just such an animal. And then lastly, a big shout out to Josh Nels as well from the OC Stunners. He stepped in and become our live producer for all of our matches. And he's never had any experience, but picks it up, learns how to do it, and just a massive driving force. So all of those guys and many more, they're just, I cannot give them enough props that they work with me day in and day out to make sure that the content we're creating is relevant, it's fun, it's engaging, and something that keeps the fans at home tuned into exactly what's going on.
Now that you mentioned Brian Denise, I actually have the honor of knowing Brian Denise, as I see him all over the place, all over social media, whether it's with Balboa Bay Volleyball, Orange Coast College Volleyball, or even back in the day when he was with Corona Del Mar. And he's also an assistant coach for Cal State Fullerton, or a volunteer assistant coach. But either way, I do want to give a shout to Brian Denise and all that he's done. What's it like having Brian Denise on your team, on your NVA?
Oh man, it's awesome. And what's so funny is the way the NVA marketing team was developed. It's actually the team that was built for the Ramblers with Ryan Schickling, myself, and Brian Denise. And from there, things were going pretty well. So we moved that team over to the NVA media team. And as a result, the Ramblers media gets very little attention, relatively speaking. But no, Brian, he's a brilliant guy in the sense of his understanding of how to shoot things, how to put them together, but also just tons of creativity in terms of what he wants to do at the league. And so it's awesome to be the guy that gets a chance to just tell these guys, hey man, if you want it, you have an idea, let's get it done. And there's some big announcements coming from the league in upcoming weeks here. So, Brian's been working on it all day long, and I'm just seeing constant communication from him about what he wants to see, what he wants to achieve, and seeing him take that and run with it. It's just, it's awesome. You get to see him continue growing as a person, as a professional, and most importantly, as a friend working alongside him.
Excellent. A couple more questions, and then we'll hit the commercial break. So, for the NBA playoffs, what will a team have to do in order to win the whole thing? Just because basically the playoffs are a whole different animal, and when it comes to some teams, like obviously when it comes to like some teams in different sports, sometimes the best teams can lose early and not live up to its expectations. So basically, fill in the blank. This team will win the NVA championship if they blank. And it could be long, it could be short. You just got to fill in that blank.
Okay. I'm definitely a homer here, and I've got two. But I've got to say, the Las Vegas Ramblers will win the NBA championship if they minimize errors. There's a long running joke that the Las Vegas Ramblers don't let anyone else play the game. They're going to end the point, whether it's for themselves or for the other team, with an error. So if they mitigate those errors, that team is in a good place to win it. If I had to look at the other side, I could make a similar, man, that's hard. I could also say that for the New Jersey Freedom. If they play their game, they win that. I could make the same statement for the OC Stunners. If they wake up and, they're playing some uncharacteristic matches, and I think a lot of it has to do with their players have been kind of in and out this year, so they haven't quite meshed yet. But it's hard to ever think that it's safe to bet against Matt Hilling, Corey Chambers, Nick West. There's just so many guys there that have played on the best courts in the world, and they know when to turn it on. Also, Texas Tyrants, can't leave them out. Jake Langlois, Gianluca Grosso might be the best 1-2 duo on the outside in the league. So pretty bad answer to your question, unfortunately, because I just listed, I think, half the teams there, but it's hard not to. If I had to give an answer, I am going to be a homer. I'm going to be confident and say Las Vegas Ramblers, but I'd be remiss and unfair to leave those other three squads out of the conversation.
It's all good, and I totally understand your standpoint. So now I got to give you this last question, and this was actually asked in our live chat room on Spreaker. This one comes from our host of our DMV sports show and wine show. His name is Mike Pat. He actually asks, how high can you jump?
Let's see. I have maxed out in terms of what I measured. I've measured a 34-inch vert, I think. I believe I touched 11.2. I was touching 11.2 or 11.3 back in 2020. To be fair, that's the only time I've ever really measured my vert. But I'll also just say I touch high enough.
That's a great answer. I'm sure you jump higher than me. I'm fairly certain that is the case. But anyway, that is actually going to wrap it up. Unless you have anything more you want to add, if I missed anything, definitely feel free to let me know.
I guess then I would just say a huge shout out to you. You're constantly in the YouTube chats. We see it. What you do for the sport, what you're doing for our league in terms of just representing the athletes. It is such an important part of the league that unfortunately, I love being in control of what's next. This is something I don't have any control over, is who wants to engage with the league and in what way they want to do it. And so having guys like you that just are so invested in the sport and growing the game, you don't just talk about growing the game, you do it day in and day out. And so from someone that is trying to do the same, I find what work you do really, really inspiring, and I just appreciate the opportunity to come on today and talk about it.
Thanks, Nick. And I should also make note that volleyball isn't just about the NCAA aspect sort of thing. It's about professionally and not just indoors, but outdoors. Like, I don't just talk NCAA men's volleyball or women's volleyball or beach volleyball. I talk NVA, AVP, VNL. I even talk high school volleyball and even some 3C2A volleyball, just because that's kind of in my neck of the woods. So when it comes to Set Point, having been in 150 episodes already, I basically want to be, all over the place. I want to be all over volleyball. I don't want to be just a one-trick pony. I want to be I want to have a lot of variety. That's what I'm trying to say. So
I think you do that brilliantly. Anyone that's not following you on Twitter, they're definitely missing out on easy updates. And if they want to know how to follow the sport at any level, then they definitely need to go check you out on Twitter, because there's just constant updates, whether it be VNL, men's, women's, college, doesn't matter. You were covering us all weekend long, so it just makes it easy, because that's one of the biggest things that makes volleyball hard to follow. All these different leagues all over the world, is some of them are on YouTube, some are on Volleyball TV. You get all these different subscriptions and things like that, and you're just an easy way to keep up with the sport.
Excellent, and I appreciate the kind words, Nick. Thank you very much, Nick England, for being on today's episode of Set Point, the 150th episode of Set Point. We're going to take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we come back, I'll be discussing the VNL on the men's side of things, and then previewing the women's championship round, and then I'll basically be discussing the set point and how far it's come. So once again, thank you to Nick England for being my guest. Oh, before we go, Nick, definitely do plug in all of your social medias. Even though it's in the description, definitely do tell everyone where to follow the NVA and where to follow you.
Yeah, so I think more important than mine is definitely the NVA. Check it out on YouTube. TikTok, it's, I believe, NVA_USA. On Instagram, NVA USA. TikTok's been booming in the last couple of months. We've grown to 45,000 followers. Every match is live streamed from the base cam there. Instagram coverage is happening every day. Of course, we're on Facebook as well, and Twitter posts are going up most of the time as well. So a variety of ways. We also have the NVA app on NVA USA. On both app stores, as well as NVAUSA.com. On my own personal stuff, you can check me out for England on Air. It's my last name. More likely to see dog content than volleyball content. I'm one of those people that's fantastic about posting for the league, and then I forget about my own stuff. And so I will frequently get home from a long weekend of working and realize I have posted absolutely nothing at all.
No problem, Nick. We definitely do appreciate you being on with us on Set Point. Now we'll take ourselves a commercial break. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' the NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Davidson.
It's your boy, Dentarius Lava.
And we are the hosts of Fast Break here on IE Sports Radio, where we discuss everything in the world of basketball from prep to the pros.
You guys should definitely check us out, man. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We got all the basketball information you guys need, so we look forward to you guys listening in.
And please do, because we are the best basketball show on this side of the Mississippi. And please do check us out on Twitter at FastBreakISR. D-Lock, where's our time again?
8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That give you guys spending time on a Sunday.
Tune in.
It's IE Sports Radio. It is your direct feed for all that is sports. It is Philly Sports Talk with Cash and Chris every Tuesday night right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Philly Sports Talk with Cash and Chris is the most comprehensive view on Philadelphia sports exclusively right here on IE Sports Radio. You know what it is, your direct feed for all that is sports. Tuesday night, IE Sports Radio, Philly Sports Talk with Cash and Chris.
College football, and do you want to hear a college football show dedicated to all that is college football, including junior college and the CCCAA and the NJCAA, the NAIA, and the NCAA, including Division III, Division II, Division I AA in the FCS, and Division I Single A in the FBS. Well then look no further. Join myself, Larry B., and my colleagues, Mr. H-Town Blake Henley, and Mr. Christian Espinoza each week during the college football season for the latest in college football on 3 and Out College Edition right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Once again, a huge shout out to Nick England. I appreciate him for being on here and talking NVA and talking about how he got into volleyball and all things volleyball. It really means a lot, and we definitely have to give him a round of applause for being on the show. So, big round of applause to Nick England for taking time out of his day. So, I pretty much recapped most of the matches on Twitter, but here were basically the matches from this past weekend. So, we'll start off with the first matchup. We have the Texas Tyrants versus the Chicago Untouchables. The Tyrants had pretty much already locked up its playoff position for the most part. All it just needed to do was win one more match, and then it was a lock. The Untouchables, on the other hand, they needed to run the table and get help from the rest of the league in order to make the postseason. The first set, it looked as if the Untouchables were going to play with sense of urgency, and they took that first set quite nicely. But then the second set was just all Texas, as Texas basically behind the strong arm of Jake Langlois and Gianluca Grasso, who made his return. They were able to take set 2, and then set 3 was more so of the same. It's just that Texas really stepped it up, took that third set. And then the fourth set, it was basically just all Texas. They did not want to get involved with a fifth set, as the Tyrants won the match in 4 sets. The loss eliminated the Untouchables from playoff contention, so it is quite the bummer. But the Untouchables had a good season. You'll see why. So also on our Friday slate, we had the Utah Stingers taking on the Dallas Tornadoes. It was another case of where the Tornadoes, or where one team won the first set, as the Tornadoes won the first set behind, once again, a solid performance from Felix Chapman. But then the Stingers just came back. They kind of slowed down Chapman all that much, and they basically just played their game, and they ran the table throughout the next 3 sets, as basically the Stingers won that one in 4 sets, and they clinched the American Central Division, as it was quite impressive that the Stingers were able to win that one in 4 sets. I had no doubt that they would win, though, just because the Stingers they've kind of been a cut above the rest when it comes to them, the Dallas Tornadoes, and the Colorado Kraken. I kind of describe the American Central Division as kind of the NFC East, as basically it's just wide open for the most part, despite records, but I kind of digress on that. So that's how the Utah Stingers won the American Central Division. Then we had the Orange County Stars taking on the New Jersey Freedom. Freedom needed a win in order to lock up the number 1 overall seed, and more important, well, not its number 1 overall seed. They need to lock up its division. They need to lock up the National Coastal Division. The Stunners still had an outside chance of winning the National Coastal Division, but they needed to win the match at hand, as Nick West was able to propel the Stunners to a first set win. The Stunners were actually down 21-18, but they were able to rally back and win the first set. Then the next 2 sets belonged to the Freedom, as the middle blocker duo for the New Jersey Freedom, as well as Joe Norman, was just too strong for the Stunners. And credit to the Stunners, they did all that they could. Nick West did all that he could to get the Stunners still on track. But the Freedom took the next 2 sets. All they just needed was one more set. They led late in set number 4, but credit to the Stunners, they dug their way out of a 20-18 deficit, and they took the 4th set 25-23, forcing a 5th set. But then in the end, the Freedom were just too much for them, as the Freedom basically just, I wouldn't say they dominated their way to winning the 5th set, but they just basically were in no danger whatsoever, as the Freedom clinched the National Coastal Division with the 5-set win over the Stunners. Then the last matchup on Friday we had was the Las Vegas Ramblers versus the Inland Empire Matadors. The Inland Empire Matadors versus the Las Vegas Ramblers. The Matadors took the first set, and it looked as if, or actually no, the Ramblers took the first set, and then the Matadors took the second set, as basically it was tightened throughout that second set, but then the 3rd and 4th set belonged to the Ramblers. Despite not having Jordan Hoppy, who was playing in the AVP event, which I'll be recapping next week, but the Ramblers were able to defeat the Inland Empire Matadors in 4 sets, as basically they beat them in 4 sets. They weren't in too much danger. No offense to the Matadors, but I kind of had a good feeling the Ramblers were going to win that one. So one thing I didn't talk about with Nick was that the NVA All-Star game NVA All-Star match was played on Saturday, as that actually kind of had to shuffle around some time. So instead of 9 a.m. games, noon games, 3 p.m. games, and 6 p.m. games, it was actually 9 a.m. games, 11:30 a.m. games, 2 p.m. games, and 4:30 p.m. games. So all the matches were sweeps, and the All-Star game itself was actually the American Conference sweeping the National Conference. I kind of didn't expect that, as Nick and I kind of talked beforehand about how impressive the American Conference was, and I honestly think that this was quite the good event, the good first event. The first set, it could have gone either way. It looked as if the American Conference was going to run away with it, but then the National Conference was able to have a few set points, but then the American Conference was able to close the door, as I want to say they won off of a service ace. Not entirely certain, but they won it. They won the first set. I think it was 30-28. And the second set, the American Conference has dominated the second set for the most part. But then Jose Malero, the libero, the 5'3" libero for the Texas Tyrants, came in, had a great serving run, as the National Conference actually trailed by as many as 11, as they got within, I want to say 4 points, until the American Conference kind of made some shuffling of their lineup. And eventually the American Conference did win that second set. And the third set, the American Conference won it quite nicely. It didn't mean anything in terms of records, but it was great to have in terms of rewarding some of the players who were voted in by some of their peers, and for the players that were basically voted in by the NVA committee. I basically talked about how on Twitter that the Los Angeles Blaze swept, or not the Los Angeles Blaze, the Texas Tyrants swept the Los Angeles Blaze, the Utah Stingers swept the Colorado Kraken, the Orange County Stunners swept the Seattle Sasquatch, which eliminated them from playoff contention. Then we had the Las Vegas Ramblers sweeping Southern Exposure. So back to Sunday's matches. The New Jersey Freedom swept the Seattle Sasquatch, which basically was not surprising. The Sasquatch were missing a very hefty portion of its team, as the Freedom basically just swept their way to victory, and the New Jersey Freedom finished the season 10-0. And I should also make note that the Las Vegas Ramblers finished 9-1, and the Texas Tyrants finished 9-1 as well. So for the Freedom to finish 10-0 speaks to high volumes of how much they've improved. Joe Norman, like I said, coming from Southern Exposure, he's just done phenomenally, and honestly, if it weren't for Felix Chapman, I think Norman could be the MVP of the NVA. So the Sasquatch finished their season at 1-9. Tough first season for the Sasquatch, but they will get better as time goes on. Who knows, maybe they'll have the same the same season as the Tornadoes. So jumping into the big match that really meant a lot, the Inland Empire Matadors took on Southern Exposure. So it was basically win in you're in for the Matadors and Exposure. The Exposure, despite starting the season not off to a great start, they actually swept their way in this matchup against the Inland Empire Matadors. Granted, I didn't get to see most of it, but that's because it was a very quick match and I was still at work. Poor me. As Southern Exposure punched their ticket into the NVA playoffs for the second straight season, the Matadors, unfortunately, were eliminated, but a valiant effort they had throughout the entire season. Then we had the 3 p.m. matchup between the Dallas Tornadoes and the Colorado Kraken. The winner of this match would also make it into the playoffs, as Felix Chapman, like I said, 31 kills. And despite a spirited effort from the Colorado Kraken, the Tornadoes were able to win it in 5 sets. They actually were down 2-1 in the match, but then Felix Chapman was just a monster. He was a man on the mission, as the Tornadoes, for the first time in its NVA tenure, which they've only been in the season for 2 years, are playoff bound. Tough end for the Kraken, but basically the Colorado Kraken have a bright future ahead of them. They finished the season 2-8, while the Tornadoes finished 4-6. Yes, 4-6 can get you into the playoffs, and Southern Exposure also finished 4-6. But remember, there's only 10 matches. It doesn't matter if you have 4 wins, or 3 wins, or 1 win. As long as you're in the postseason, you're basically playing more volleyball. Anyway, so the final matchup of the regular season, aka match number 60, was the Chicago Untouchables versus the Los Angeles Blaze. This had no implications of playoffs whatsoever, as the Seattle Sasquatch, when they lost their match to the Orange County Stunners, that basically gave the Los Angeles Blaze the right of way into the postseason. Basically, the Untouchables and Sasquatch needed to run the table in order to make the playoffs, and then they needed the Blaze to lose out. Wasn't the case, as the Untouchables lost their first match of the event, as well as the Sasquatch. So the Blaze basically had nothing to play for. They did go up 2-0 in the match over the Untouchables, but the Untouchables did not want to go out with a whimper. They wanted to go out with a bang, as they took the third set. The fourth set, they jumped out to an early lead, and they never relinquished it. Now, the fifth set was bonkers. The fifth set was just all that and more, as basically the Untouchables, they jumped out to an early lead. Actually, no, they fell behind early, then they built an early lead, and then it was 8-7 in favor of the Untouchables. They eventually went up 14-12, and it looked as if the Untouchables were going to win that one, but the Blaze were able to stay alive, and it was basically, the Untouchables had so many match points, I forgot how many they had. I want to say they had one at 14, we're just going to count down. They had one at 14-12, 14-13, 15-14, 16-15, 17-16, 18-17, 19-18, 2019, 21-20, 22, and then 22-21. So they had 9 match points, and they eventually won the match off of a Los Angeles Blaze hitting error, as the Chicago Untouchables won the matchup that didn't really mean all that much to them, but they played for pride, as they reverse swept the Los Angeles Blaze. I even said it in the chat room. The most dangerous team in the NVA is one that doesn't have a whole lot to play for. So the Untouchables finished the season 2-8, but it was just an entertaining final match of the season. I was basically watching that match, and I'm like, can this match... It's like, why does this match have to be? I even was basically joking and saying, can we flex the Untouchables Blaze game to like the 9 a.m. slot, and then put New Jersey Freedom and Seattle in the noon slot, and then the final 2 matches are Exposure Matadors and Tornadoes Kraken, but this isn't the NFL. Like, I'm just saying. But anyway, that was basically your weekend. So, like I said, the teams that were the final standings of the top 8 teams that are making the postseason, starting with the National Conference, are New Jersey Freedom as the 1 seed, Texas Tyrants as the 2 seed, Orange County Stunners as the 3 seed, and the Los Angeles Blaze as the 4 seed. Over to the American Conference, we had the Las Vegas Ramblers as the 1 seed, the Utah Stingers as the 2 seed, the Southern Exposure as the 3 seed, and then the Dallas Tornadoes as the 4 seed. So those are your 8 teams making it to the playoffs, where they will be playing at the Pierce Sports Center in San Bernardino. And it's going to be a fun time. I really can't wait for the NVA playoffs to start, and I'm excited for it. So that's basically going to do it for the NVA portion of the show. I know we talked a lot about the NVA, but honestly, it needed to be discussed just because my guest was Nick England, and, well, we needed to talk some NVA. So now let's jump on over to some VNL. I'm going to skip the AVP events to recap until next week, just because I want to say there is no AVP events happening this week, just because we had 2 this weekend. We had the Waupaca Open in Wisconsin, and then we also had the Hermosa Beach Open in Hermosa Beach in California, which I could have gone to, but I didn't want to. As Larry B pops in the chat room, he says, happy 150, Teran. I appreciate that. I'll be discussing that in a little bit. As I also need to give a shout to Gina G, Mike Pat, Andrew Hagenbaugh, John Felipe, Pierre Moss in the chat room previously when they were basically listening to my interview with Nick England. So, basically, to the VNL, as I'm 95% certain there's not going to be a AVP event next week, just because, the next AVP event will be the the Atlantic City Open in New Jersey. So, I don't have anything to preview this week. So, I can recap the AVP events from Hermosa Beach and Waupaca next week, and then I could also go back to my regular schedule of previewing schedules and whatnot. Anyway, now let's jump on over to the VNL, just because the VNL is what we all came to listen for outside of the NVA. So, for the US, they basically ended everything on a positive note. They were unfortunately not in the best position to clinch the top seed, but they were able to go a perfect 4-0 as they beat Germany in 4 sets on the 4th of July, late in the 4th of July, as they won the first 2 sets 25-21, 25-19. Then they lost the 3rd set 25-22, but won the 4th set 25-18. Their next match was against France, which was actually leading the VNL standings, as the U.S. dropped the first set 25-15, and I knew how tough France was going to be, but then the U.S. bounced back in a big way as they won the second set 25-22. They lost the second set to France 25-22, and at that point I was like, I am at peace knowing that the U.S. gave it their all, and they will basically have, if they push it to a fifth set, then that would be awesome, but I'm at peace knowing that they at least took one set off of France. Fortunately for the U.S., they took the fourth set 25-14 in convincing fashion, forcing a fifth set. And that fifth set, the U.S. just dominated as they won that fifth set 15-8 over the best team in the standings of the VNL, as the U.S. was led by TJ DeFalco and an assortment of all sorts of players, as overall the U.S. they played probably their best game of the VNL. I mean, yes, they had the Brazil match, which they were strong for in the most part, and they also had the Japan match, which they also won. But I think this match was basically what highlighted them the most. And then 2 days after, the U.S. beat Canada in straight sets, 25-19, 25-15, 25-19. And then yesterday, they closed out the round-robin play with a win over Argentina. They won the first set 29-27, but lost the next two sets 25-22, 25-20. The U.S. then won the fourth set 25-13, and then they outlasted Argentina in the fifth set 17-15. They won off of a Micah Christensen block. Nick England and I talked about how Micah Christensen might have actually taken a pay cut just to come back and play in his hometown and possibly play for the NVA. So, back to the U.S., they were led by TJ DeFalco, who had 28 points. Yes, when it comes to pro leagues and FIVB, they use points instead of kills. They obviously use kills, but they love to use points overall. So, basically, if you get an ace, that's a point. If you get a kill, that's a point. That's basically how they tally up points. So anyway, the U.S. actually finished tied atop the standings at 10-2 with Italy and Poland. The only difference is that the U.S. has 27 points compared to Italy and Poland's 31. Believe it or not, Italy finished atop the standings as they dropped fewer sets than Poland did, as the sets won and lost ratio was 32-9, while Poland's sets won and lost ratio was 33-10. So overall, that's basically how the VNL standings worked out. So your top 8 teams are Italy as the first place team, Poland the second place team, the US the third place team, Japan, France in fourth, Japan in fifth, Brazil in sixth, which I kind of find surprising, Iran in seventh, and then the Netherlands in sixth, which finished 6-6. So that is basically all your matchups right there. So it says here that the U.S. plays Mexico in the group stage play, which didn't even make the cut. That's weird. So basically, in two more, not this week because we have the women's FIVB, or not the FIVB, but we have the women's VNL knockout round. But next week we will be seeing the men do battle in the knockout round. So, speaking of the women, so this week is the women's VNL knockout round, and it's sure to be a barn burner as the quarterfinals will consist of, starting on Wednesday, Brazil and Japan, and US and Serbia. So, basically, despite Serbia finishing 6th and the US finishing 1st, the two are facing one another. And then Brazil and Japan, they're basically facing one another. I'm not entirely certain on how the VNL does their whole seeding in terms of quarterfinals, but I'm not going to argue it. It is what it is, and it's just I'm not just going to go into detail or just try to look it up. The US is playing Serbia, Brazil is playing Japan. That's all you need to know. And then the other quarterfinal on Thursday, or quarterfinals on Thursday, will be Italy versus China and Turkey versus Thailand. And then the semifinals are slated for Friday, and then the final is slated for Saturday. So I imagine the same format is going to be for the men's side of things come next week. So, for the U.S., they obviously finished atop the standings. They finished 11-1, and they finished with 32 points, ahead of Brazil and Italy, which basically were neck and neck. The only difference was that Brazil lost one less set. That's how close it was. Man. And then China, Japan, and Serbia each finished 8-4. Turkey finished 7-5. Turkey, I think, is probably the most dangerous team in this whole knockout round. I think Turkey really showed their stuff in the final week of the women's VNL season as they defeated Japan, which was kind of surprising. They almost defeated the U.S., which was also surprising. And then they also finished a perfect 4-0 in their last event as they took down Bulgaria in straight sets and they beat Belgium in 4 sets. So, actually, no, they didn't finish a perfect 4-0. They lost to U.S. What am I talking about? So, either way, Turkey is probably the most dangerous team despite finishing 7th in the VNL standings. And I really think it's going to be it's going to be very entertaining to see Turkey do battle against Thailand. I'm pretty sure they'll beat Thailand, though. Just because Thailand isn't really the best of teams, and the fact that they just barely squeaked into the knockout round kind of speaks to high volumes of how Turkey is going to use its athleticism to overwhelm them. I really think, like I said last week, between the U.S., Brazil, Italy, China, Japan, and Turkey, I think those 6 teams are basically the favorites to win it all. Now, I know it's a lot of teams, but I really think that between those teams, those are probably the heavy favorites to win the whole thing. And even the U.S. is not safe. There's not going to be any easy matchups when it comes to those 6 teams. Not trying to take anything away from Serbia and Thailand, but the U.S. is still the number 1 team in the nation. Brazil is right behind them. Italy has been quite the pleasant surprise. Japan, despite a few bumps in the road, they're still up there in terms of talent. China has kind of resurged, and Turkey is very athletic. So, for me, I think those 6 teams are really going to do damage in the VNL knockout round. Like I said, matchups start on Wednesday, the 13th, when the U.S. and Serbia take on one another, and Brazil and Japan take on one another. I imagine the winners of those matchups will face each other in the semifinals. The winner of the U.S.-Serbia matchup and the Brazil-Japan matchup will face one another in the semifinals. And then that's when it gets really real, just because then we get some of the best teams facing one another. So that's going to do it for the VNL portion of the show. And before we sign on out of Set Point, this is episode 150, and I kind of wanted to give my thoughts on Set Point and its 150th episode. It's been a long time coming. At first, I didn't even want this to be a 150th episode special, just because, 150 episodes, it's cool and all, but is it as big as, the 50th episode and the 100th episode and the 200th episode? I don't think I'm going to have, a 250th episode special if I continue to do Set Point for that long and whatnot. But overall, it's just been amazing to continue to do Set Point, even despite my busy schedule, which has kind of seen me shuffle around Set Point to, sometimes doing it on Sundays. Even when I was, sick, or even when I was, worked to the bones of my body at my full-time job, it's still quite amazing, and I really like doing Set Point, and I hope to continue to do Set Point. Once I reach 200 episodes, then that's probably my biggest milestone. That's probably not going to happen for a while, as probably my next milestone for this show will probably be the 3-year anniversary, which will be September 30th, and I'm going to have to really work out a lot of kinks when it comes to doing Set Point. I may even have to do Set Point on Saturday, which is not going to be ideal, but I do want to do Set Point on September 30th, and basically that was when Set Point first came on, so we're going on 3 years of Set Point. We're 150 episodes in. And fun fact, I was actually going to get probably the I wouldn't say the best player, but the best player via Volleyball Magazine, the best high school boys volleyball player as a guest. But he unfortunately is playing in the Pan Am Cup. So, but I was going to get Dylan Klein, a USC commit, the standout for Loyola boys volleyball of Los Angeles, on as a guest. But unfortunately, he was in Mexico with the Pan Am team. So, for him to decline was actually a blessing in disguise. And he says he does want to be a part of the show, just because he has listened to a couple of episodes of Set Point and basically had good things to say. All because I was talking high school volleyball, and I was talking a little USC volleyball, but I digress. So definitely be on the lookout for me having Dylan Klein on the show sooner rather than later. Hopefully I can get him real soon, just before he starts school up at USC. So Set Point is doing big things as well, just like the NVA, and both of us have one thing in common. That's to continue to grow the sport of the game of volleyball. And speaking of growing the sport, before we head out, we have to do the sponsors and the shouts to our fan of the month. So, IE Sports Radio is proud to call the Southern California Warriors the official sponsor of IE Sports Radio. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to trap for professional teams, different colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on Twitter at SoCal Warriors, on Instagram at Southern California_Warriors, and on Facebook by typing in the word Southern California and then Warriors. And then IE Sports Radio, our main platform, is available on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can follow them on Twitter and on Instagram at IE Sports Radio, TikTok at IE Sports Radio, and on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then Sports, then Radio. And then once you go to www.iesportsradio.com, you will see a Patreon link at the top, which starts at $5 a month. This will give you a shout out from all 27 of our shows, including this one. And higher tiers will include IE Sports Radio merchandise, such as sweaters and t-shirts, access to IESRU, the podcasting university of IE Sports Radio, and even a chance to be featured on IE Sports Radio's segment of their flagship show, The Defining Moment, with the one, the only, Larry B. Because for the past 8 years going on, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. In addition, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content from interviewing coaches and other authorized media personnel, such as Nick England, as well as the interviewing of athletes. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans, and with your help, IE Sports Radio is ready to take the next biggest step going forward. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for continuing to make IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. We have 4 Patreon supporters: Bay Area Raised Apparel, Market Flow Great, Key to the Gate, and an anonymous supporter. Also, our fan of the month is still Justin Ekstrom, a Minnesota Vikings fan hailing from the Great Lakes of Minnesota, and who is also a proud supporter of 7th Street Pizza. I've definitely been seeing that on my timeline. Not that there's a problem or anything like that. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for the 150th episode of Set Point. My final advice to you all for doing a podcast like this is continue to follow your dreams. Don't let anyone deter you, just because anything is possible in this world. But with that being said, it's time to drop that beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to the 150th episode of Set Point. I know I nearly went 2 hours, but hey, it's a 150th episode special. What can you do? And I also had a guest as well. So, big shout out to Nick England, the broadcasting and marketing manager of the NVA. Thank you, Nick England, for being a guest on Set Point. Thank you to everyone that tuned in. Thank you to Gina G. Thank you to Mike Pat, who asked his nice little question. Thank you to Andrew Hagenbaugh, John Felipe, Pierre Moss, and Larry B. Definitely gotta give Larry B a shout out just because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be doing this show. So, for everyone here at iSports Radio, and for my guest, Nick England, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourself a great rest of the night. Enjoy the volleyball that basically went on last week. I will be back next week, and everything should be back to normal, unless I get another guest. I will be back Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Until then, wear your sunscreen. Don't be like me, who thought he can get away with not wearing sunscreen, and then eventually you get sunburned. And if you are sunburned, apply your aloe vera. Don't be that person that is sunburned, because it's not fun. I'll see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, but until then, have a great night, and I'll see you Friday. Peace!